Congressional Democrats, Karl Rove is just not that into you, or the subpoenas you keep hoping will make him testify. Today, the former top Bush advisor proved it again. He had been ordered to appear at a deposition for the House Judiciary Committee at 10 o'clock this morning. Everything was set to go. According to a Judiciary spokesperson, the court reporter and the counsel were there, ready to get Mr. Rove's testimony. But once again, the man known as the architect was a no-show. For almost 2 years, Congress has been trying to get Mr. Rove to testify. Both the House and the Senate Judiciary Committee have played the usually persuasive subpoena card. But Rove keeps standing them up anyway. He claims that his work in the White House means he has executive privilege and is exempt from testifying. There are two main Bush-era controversies about which committee members want to question Mr. Rove. The firings of 8 U.S. attorneys in 2006, a scandal, frankly, that Mr. Rove is linked to by emails indicating he was aware of the firings from an early stage, and the prosecution of former Democratic Governor Don Siegelman of Alabama, which Siegelman claims was politically motivated. But as a former aide of a former president, can Mr. Rove plausibly use executive privilege to avoid telling Congress what they want to know? A federal judge has rejected that claim from former White House counsel Harriet Miers and former Chief of Staff Josh Bolten. Both are now appealing that ruling. So what's it gonna take to get Karl Rove to sit down and start talking? If the third subpoena wasn't the charm, what is? Joining me now, Jonathan Turley, professor of constitutional law at George Washington University Law School. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Allison.
So what happens next? How can Congress get Karl Rove to testify?
Well, it's becoming clear that it's going to take a great deal. He's not coming voluntarily. He's refusing what is usually a binding obligation to appear. And I don't think Congress has ever faced in its history a more flagrant example of contempt. What makes this even more difficult and more egregious is that he doesn't have a good basis for this. He doesn't have a viable claim, but he's not even showing up. That's the astonishing thing, is if you do have a claim that you have some form of privilege, you usually show up and invoke the privilege. You don't just simply tell Congress that I'm just not prepared to come over and answer a formal subpoena.
How long can this go on, or is this a judicial staring contest to see who blinks first?
Well, you know what? It's really a one-man staring contest because there is no contest. There is no game. Congress has a right to get his testimony under these circumstances. He's yet to articulate a plausible argument under the Constitution that he can't testify. The arguments he's made has been, as you noted, rejected. And so the question is not who's going to blink first. The question is, when is Congress going to simply tire of this game and to explain to Karl Rove that you're not a nation unto yourself. You have an obligation as a citizen to appear, and if you don't, then there are legal ramifications.
Harriet Miers and Josh Bolten are apparently negotiating about testifying. What kind of effect could that have on what happens to Mr. Rove in his executive privilege claim?
Well, I think that Miers and Bolten are expecting a negative ruling. The ruling that went against them was very well based. Most scholars, I think, agree that they do not have the executive privilege claim that was made by the Bush administration. These claims are just sweeping. They would blow a hole right through the balance of power, the checks and balances in our system. It's simply unsustainable in the way that the Bush administration articulated it. Doesn't mean that there aren't some valid executive privilege claims, but it's an extreme assertion that they've made. It's just not something you can maintain. So if they finally recognize that and they're prepared to testify, it will leave Karl Rove all alone in the middle of a field. And he's got to worry about one rather obvious problem. If he ends up being charged, he will be tried in the District of Columbia. And I doubt he wants to see the inside of a courtroom as a defendant.
I want to get your take on President Obama's administration apparently siding with the Bush administration and trying to quash a lawsuit that would force the White House to try to recover what could be millions of missing emails from the Bush era. Is this a sign that the Obama administration isn't all that interested in helping the House get to Rove's testimony?
Well, this is one of the points that has distressed many of us. The Obama administration is carrying a lot of water for the Bush administration, and each day they seem to be taking the position of the Bush White House. Here they're trying to kill litigation that is so important to historians and civil libertarians, to people who believe in the balance of power, the preservation of presidential records. All the merits are on the other side of the case that Obama has now taken. And he is doing exactly what the Bush administration tried to do, and that is to extinguish this litigation. And this is coming on the heels of statements supporting the Bush administration on the treatment of detainees, on endorsing the rhetoric of on the war of terror, the refusal so far to investigate war crimes. It's a very worrisome trend. And I think that people who have a lot of faith in President Obama and his closest allies have to be the first to call him to account and say, you know, these weren't good arguments before, and to take them secondhand and to argue them in court makes you equally guilty of the type of excesses of your predecessor.
This is clearly to be continued. Jonathan Turley, professor of constitutional law at George Washington University, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Allison.